The Lakers just lost to the Phoenix Suns in round 1, much to the surprise of many, including myself. And while this series, as well as this overall down season, can be blamed majority on injuries, there's still factors that were both exposed in this series and throughout the regular season that clearly showed weaknesses with this roster that need to be addressed. Not to mention, with the existence of the Nets making the NBA a serious arms race right now, I don't even think the Lakers would have won the championship, injury or no, so they have to make some changes in order to adjust for that difference in talent, as well as just how often this roster is getting hurt. So, how do the Lakers once again win a championship with both Anthony Davis and LeBron James as the core of this roster? Let's talk about it. Before I continue on with this video, about half of the people that watch these videos are not subscribed, so if you fall into that 50%, then subscribe. Also drop a like on this video, only takes 1 second and makes a massive difference, and go subscribe to my second channel to get my post-game reaction to pretty much every playoff game from here on out, because I'm not going to be missing any second round games. First round, there were a couple, but every playoff game from here on out, I'm going to be watching and I'm going to be talking about over on that channel. Okay, first let's actually talk about the contract situation on this team. Dennis Schroeder famously declined a big extension, and because he took point guard for the Lakers out of his Instagram bio, I'm going to guess that he's probably not coming back. So that means he's a free agent, and with LeBron, AD, KCP, Kuzma, and Marc Gasol being the only guys on the books going into this offseason, they do have some options to work with. Montrezl Harrell has a team option, and I only pick that up if I'm trading him, because otherwise, why would I not just spend that $10 million on a player that can actually contribute and play in the playoffs? Because Montrezl Harrell wasn't doing that. But he does have value as just $10 million in expiring salary if you were to pick up his option and move him. But if they decline that option, obviously Dennis Schroeder leaves, then they will have some cap space to work with. Not a lot, but not nothing. They also have 2 very tradable contracts, both KCP and the extension of Kuzma that is kicking in for the 2021-22 season means that they have $26 million in tradable salary, and if they picked up Montrezl Harrell's team option, they would have $36 million in tradable salary, which is nearly a max contract. So with all of that stuff in mind, what do the Lakers actually need? They need reliable center play, shooting, depth, and a third star/scorer who is better than Dennis Scrotum. That was so disrespectful. I'm sorry, Dennis. In terms of assets, they have those soon to be expiring contracts, their first round pick that should be in the high 20s, as well as the rights to Talen Horton-Tucker's restricted free agency, though he is a restricted free agent and he is not under contract, so it's not the easiest situation to trade him. Really, you'd have to get him under contract and then move him. That's not much to get you like a perennial all-star caliber player, or really even an all-star caliber player, but like a 20-point scorer who can be a secondary playmaker and just be relied upon to be something when AD and LeBron or either or are hurt. That would be nice to have. With Anthony Davis constantly being injured and LeBron having his 2 biggest injuries of his career in the last 3 seasons, having something to rely on if one of those guys at least is out would be nice. One option is you could trade KCP, Kuzma, and Harrell after you pick up his team option for Kemba Walker. Now that is a very, very risky move. I think Boston takes that without hesitation because that's clearing you $23 million in cap space. And with him having a down year, I think Boston is just trying to move on from him. But there's a reason they're trying to move on from him, and that's because he's been very, very wishy-washy this year. Sometimes he'll bring you an efficient 25-7. Sometimes he'll go 2 for 10. Don't really know which one you're going to get. Either way, you're also going to get a really poor defensive player. It's a gamble. Absolutely. But if it is a gamble that works out, you get a guy who can score 20 points per game, space the floor at an elite level, be a secondary playmaker, and while he might get targeted defensively, he should be good enough offensively to still be worth playing in the playoffs. So it's something, but it's definitely not ideal. Another much better option would be trading for Malcolm Brogdon as well as Justin Holiday from the Indiana Pacers, who could very well be selling this offseason, though we're just going to have to wait and see what they actually do because they could really go in a million different directions. Of course, you'd have to do those expirings, bring back Talen Horton-Tucker on whatever money he's going to get, as well as moving that first round pick in order to get Brogdon. And in the Kemba trade, you could probably keep Tucker and that first round pick for a later trade. And assuming Horton gets like $8 to $10 million a year, that's a contract where mixed with a first round pick and his potential, you could actually get something decent on top of Kemba Walker. But with this deal with Brogdon, you'd have to include that, so that's something to consider, I suppose. But Brogdon is significantly more reliable and just better than Kemba Walker. He is a 20-point per game scorer, shoots the three at an elite level, and can once again be a secondary playmaker better than Kemba can. And he's a very good defensive player, so really no real holes in his game, and he would fit flawlessly with what Los Angeles does. And Justin Holiday is one of the better backup shooters in the league, so that's something that the Lakers need to address as well, so it's nice to have. But outside of that, I don't have much. Maybe a sign and trade for Kyle Lowry to make up for the fact that you didn't make that trade previous. Maybe, and I mean maybe, a CJ McCollum trade where CJ goes to the Lakers. Lakers assets as well as Blazers assets go to a third team, and that third team is sending something worth CJ to the Blazers. But I feel like that's very, very, very unlikely, so wouldn't bank on that one. That's really like a Hall of Fame stretch, so after that, I'm stumped. There's really nothing that I can think of. Every other star player in the league, either the Lakers don't have enough assets for, or their team just won't be really willing to trade at the moment. So this is kind of all they got going for them. As for the smaller things they need to address, the shooting depth and center depth, well, first of all, for the center thing, there is this backup center on the Philadelphia 76ers who, I don't know what it is about him, but I just feel like he'd be good on the Lakers. His name is Dwight Howard. He'd probably be decent for their backup 5 spot or even starting 5 spot. I don't know what's making me think that, like he just fits so well there and maybe aid them on a championship run. I could be crazy. For the depth, there is 3 players already on this roster that I would try and bring back: Alex Caruso, Markieff Morris, and Ben McLemore. Alex is a fantastic Swiss Army knife player that I think you could probably get for around $7 million a year. Markieff is a decent defensive player with good size and a, albeit inconsistent, but decent 3-point shot. And Ben McLemore is one of the better shooters in the league, who should have been getting minutes in the playoffs, but just didn't. So you bring back those guys on relatively cheap deals. Dwight Howard on a cheap deal because he's gotten 2 of them in the last 2 years. Maybe JaVale McGee instead, because once again, I don't know if something's crazy, but I feel like he'd be a decent center for them too. Then let's say you add a shooting guard like Reggie Bullock or maybe Tony Snell. I think both of those guys could be solid enough starting 2s and be at least like 80% of what KCP was, and hopefully at least more consistent than KCP. Either that, or you could just make Justin Holiday your starting 2 guard. It's not the best situation at that position, but I think it's worth the overall improvement. Then you'd have a roster of Malcolm Brogdon, Reggie Bullock, LeBron James, Anthony Davis, Marc Gasol, or Dwight Howard, with Caruso, Holiday, Markieff Morris, Ben McLemore, and Marc Gasol / Dwight Howard. This team is better shooting-wise, has better on-ball creation, and their center position is much more reliable because Dwight Howard is just better and more consistent than Andre Drummond. The shooting is not as great as I would like it to be. Of course, you can't sign the likes of Duncan Robinson. Maybe you could bring in JJ Redick, but he's like so old and at this point a really negative defender, so I don't know how much he could actually play for you. So yeah, he's not getting minutes on the Mavericks right now for good reason, so I don't know about that type of thing. So the shooting is not going to be as good as I would like it to be, but they really don't have the assets to make the shooting as good as I would like it to be. So take what you can get. But defense-wise, depth-wise, and more versatility, and specifically getting that third guy in Malcolm Brogdon, I think this roster is significantly better than it was this year, and much more capable of dismantling a team like the Brooklyn Nets, even if after these changes, I'd still pick the Nets to win. I think the Lakers could give him a good fight with this roster. I did think that for this year as well, without injury, but you know, these adjustments make that even more likely to me. So that's the video. That's what I think the Lakers should do this offseason. Of course, we'll just have to wait and see what Rob Pelinka actually does. Hopefully he does not bring back Dennis Schroeder, because I feel like that'd kind of just be boring, and don't know that that's really going to get you anywhere. Shout out to Rudy for editing this video, but that is the end of this video. Please be sure to like and subscribe for more NBA content like this, and cue the outro music.